The rain hammered against the window pane like 1,000 desperate fists, each drop a mirror of the tears streaming down Marcus Webb's face as he stood on the doorstep of a stranger's home at 2 in the morning. In his arms, wrapped in a threadbare towel that had once been blue, his 3-month-old daughter Lily whimpered a sound so fragile, so utterly helpless, that it could break the hardest heart. He had knocked on 7 doors that night, 7 doors that had opened just wide enough for suspicion to peer through, then slammed shut against his desperation. But this door, the 8th door, was different. When it opened, he didn't see fear or judgment in the woman's eyes. He saw something he'd almost forgotten existed in this world, recognition of shared humanity. Marcus had never imagined his life would lead him here, begging a stranger for help in the dead of night. 6 months ago, he'd been a different man, an automotive technician with steady hands and a steadier paycheck, married to his high school sweetheart, Rebecca. They'd welcomed Lily into the world on a crisp October morning, her first cry filling the hospital room with a joy so pure it seemed to sanctify the air itself. Rebecca had looked at him with exhausted, radiant eyes and whispered, "We made something perfect, Marcus. We made something perfect." 3 weeks later, Rebecca was gone. The doctors called it a postpartum hemorrhage, a complication that escalated faster than anyone could stop. One moment she'd been complaining of feeling dizzy, the next she was unconscious, and then a silence. The kind of silence that follows you everywhere, that sits beside you at the dinner table, that echoes in every room of your suddenly too large apartment. Marcus had tried. God knows he'd tried. He'd balanced Lily on his hip while he worked on engines, her baby carrier secured in the corner of the garage while he changed oil and replaced brake pads. His boss had been understanding at first, but understanding has limits when customers complain about finding baby toys in their vehicles. The job ended. Then the money ended. Then the apartment ended. And now, standing in the rain with a hungry baby who hadn't eaten in 8 hours because the last container of formula had run out that afternoon, Marcus felt like he was ending too. "Please," he managed to choke out when the woman opened the door. She was maybe 40. Wearing a faded university sweatshirt and pajama pants, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. Behind her, a modest living room glowed with the warm light of a lamp left on. "Please, I'm not here to hurt anyone. My baby, she's hungry. I just need formula, or milk, or anything. I can work for it. I can fix your car, repair anything that's broken." His voice cracked, and Lily's whimper rose to a weak cry. The woman's name was Diane Rosewood, though Marcus wouldn't learn that until later. What he noticed first was how quickly she moved, how her hands reached out instinctively toward the bundle in his arms before she even spoke a word. "Come inside," she said, stepping back to widen the doorway. "Both of you, come inside right now." Marcus hesitated. He'd become accustomed to rejection, and acceptance felt almost more frightening. "I don't want to impose, I just need to." "I know what you need," Diane interrupted gently. "And standing in the rain debating isn't helping your baby. Coming." The warmth of her home hit him like a wave, and Marcus realized how cold he'd been, how numb. Diane was already moving through the living room toward what he assumed was the kitchen, calling back over her shoulder, "Sit down. Let me see her." He lowered himself onto the edge of her couch, afraid to fully commit his weight to the furniture, afraid to believe this moment was real. Diane returned with a clean blanket, which she spread across her lap before gently reaching for Lily. Marcus's arms tightened reflexively as she was all he had left, but something in Diane's eyes, a depth of understanding that transcended words, made him relax his grip. "When did she last eat?" Diane asked, carefully unwrapping the damp towel and assessing Lily with the practiced eye of someone who'd done this before. "This morning, early. I had enough formula for 1 bottle. Marcus's voice was hollow. "I've been looking for work, standing outside the Home Depot, but nobody picked me up today. By the time I got to the store, it was closed, and I didn't have the money anyway, and she was so hungry, and I just started walking, looking for somewhere, anywhere." "SHH," Diane said softly, not to silence him but to calm him. You found somewhere. You found here. What happened next would remain seared in Marcus's memory for the rest of his life. Diane looked at Lily, then at him, and said simply, "I'm still nursing my son. He's 14 months old, but I have milk. If you'll allow me, I can feed her." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Marcus had heard of wet nurses in historical contexts, had read about milk banks and donor milk, but the reality of this intimate, profound gift from a complete stranger left him speechless. He looked at his daughter, at her tiny face scrunched in hunger, at the desperate little movements of her mouth seeking sustenance, and something inside him that had been holding itself rigid for months finally broke open. "Yes," he whispered. "Please, yes." Diane adjusted her position, lifting her shirt with the unself-conscious practicality of a mother for whom this was simply what bodies were meant to do. She brought Lily to her breast, and after a moment's confusion, the baby latched on. The silence that followed was sacred. Lily's little hands, which had been clenched tight against her hunger, gradually relaxed. Her whimpers ceased. In their place came the soft, rhythmic sounds of a baby feeding, of life sustaining life. Marcus wept. He wept for his wife, for his daughter, for the man he used to be and the man he'd become. He wept for the kindness of this stranger who had opened not just her door but her very self to help a child she'd never met. And Diane, watching him with eyes that held their own stories of struggle and survival, reached out with her free hand and placed it over his. "You're not alone," she said. "Not anymore." That night stretched into morning. While Lily slept in a borrowed bassinet, Diane's son Thomas's old one, retrieved from the garage, Marcus told his story. He told Diane everything, about Rebecca's laugh, about the moment Lily was born, about the funeral he could barely afford, about the descent from stability into chaos. And Diane listened, not with pity but with presence. When dawn broke grey and hesitant through the windows, Diane made coffee and set a plate of scrambled eggs in front of Marcus. "I've been thinking," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "My husband left 2 years ago, walked out when Thomas was 6 months old. Said he wasn't ready for the responsibility. I've been raising him alone, working from home doing medical billing. I have space here. I have time. And I have what Lily needs." Marcus looked up from his untouched eggs. "I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering." Diane's voice was firm. "Stay here. You and Lily both. Give yourself time to get back on your feet. I'll feed her. You can help around the house. Maybe help me with Thomas. And we'll figure it out together." It was insane. It was impossible. It was everything Marcus needed and nothing he deserved. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking on that single syllable. "Why would you do this for us?" Diane was quiet for a moment, her fingers wrapped around her coffee mug. When she spoke, her words came slowly, weighted with memory. "When Thomas was 2 months old and John had just left, I had a breakdown in the grocery store parking lot. I was trying to get the car seat installed properly and I couldn't do it. I sat on the ground next to my car and sobbed. A woman I'd never seen before stopped, installed the seat, loaded my groceries, and then handed me her phone number. She said, 'Motherhood isn't meant to be done alone. Call me if you need anything.' I never called. I was too proud. But I think about her all the time. I think about what I should have said, what I should have done. And when you knocked on my door tonight with that baby, I saw my chance to be for you what that woman tried to be for me." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, some tectonic plate of emotion moving into a new configuration. "I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by accepting help. Thank me by letting yourself be human, which means being vulnerable sometimes." Diane smiled, and it transformed her face. "Thank me by getting some sleep. You look like you haven't slept in weeks." "Months," Marcus corrected, attempting a weak smile of his own. "I haven't really slept since Rebecca died." Over the following weeks, an unusual family took shape in Diane's modest 3-bedroom house on Maple Street. Marcus slept on the fold-out couch in the living room, though Diane repeatedly offered him the guest room. He couldn't bring himself to take more than he absolutely needed, even as he began taking more helping with repairs around the house. fixing the garbage disposal, replacing the broken fence posts in the backyard, watching Thomas when Diane needed to focus on work. Lily thrived. Fed regularly by Diane, who had explained to Marcus how relactation and continued nursing worked, the baby gained weight, her cheeks filling out, her cries becoming less desperate and more communicative. Marcus watched in awe as Diane fed both Lily and Thomas, sometimes at the same time, with a competence that spoke of deep maternal instinct. "Doesn't it bother you?" he asked one evening as Diane nursed Lily. "Feeding someone else's child?" Diane looked down at Lily, whose eyes were drifting closed in contentment. "She's not someone else's child anymore. She's just a child who needs feeding. Besides," she added, glancing toward the living room where Thomas was stacking blocks with the focused determination of toddlerhood, "in all the ways that matter, we're becoming family, not through biology, but through choice, through showing up every day and choosing each other." It was true. Marcus found himself looking forward to mornings, to the sound of Thomas's babbling and Diane's off-key humming as she made breakfast. He found purpose in the daily routine as a changing diapers, doing laundry, preparing bottles of pumped milk for when Diane was working. He found healing in Diane's company, in conversations that ranged from the profound to the mundane, in the way she never treated him like a charity case but like a partner in the chaotic enterprise of raising children. 2 months after the trainee night, Marcus got a job at a local auto shop. The owner, a friend of Diane's from church, had been willing to take a chance on him. With steady income came the question that Marcus had been dreading: what came next? He raised it over dinner one evening, after the kids were asleep. "I've been saving," he said, pushing food around his plate. "I should be able to afford a small apartment soon. Get out of your hair, give you your space back." Diane set down her fork with a sharp click. "Is that what you want?" Marcus looked up, surprised by the edge in her voice. "It's not about what I want. You've already done so, Muka. That's not what I asked." Diane's eyes were intense. "Marcus, is that what you want? Do you want to leave?" The truth burst out of him before he could contain it. God, these are being here, with you and Thomas and Lilia. It's the first time since Rebecca died that I've felt like life might be worth living again. But I can't keep taking advantage of your kindness. What if it's not kindness anymore? Diane's voice was softer now. What if it's something else? What if we've built something here that neither of us wants to tear down? Marcus's heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Thomas calls you Mama, which is as close to Marcus as he can get. I'm saying that Lily reaches for me when she's upset like I'm her mother. I'm saying that somewhere along the way, we became what we both need. You needed someone to help you survive, and I needed to remember that I could be more than just a woman abandoned by her husband. I needed to remember my own strength, my own capacity to love beyond biology." Diane reached across the table, her hand palm up. An invitation. "I'm saying maybe we don't have to figure this out according to what's conventional. Maybe we just have to figure out what's right for us." Marcus took her hand, feeling the calluses from her work, the strength in her fingers. "I love you," he said, and the words were both terrifying and liberating. "Not because you saved us, but because of who you are. Because you laugh at Thomas's terrible jokes and you sing to Lily even though you can't carry a tune, and you never make me feel less than whole, even when I feel broken." Diane's eyes glistened. "I love you too, and I love Lily like she came from my own body. Every time I feed her, every time I soothe her to sleep, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." They were married that fall, in Diane's backyard, with Thomas toddling through the fallen leaves and Lily cooing from Rebecca's sister's arms. Marcus had been terrified to tell Rebecca's family about Diane, afraid they'd see it as a betrayal, but Rebecca's mother had hugged him tight and whispered, "Rebecca would have wanted you to find someone who could love you both. She would have wanted this." On their wedding night, after the small celebration had ended and the children were asleep, Marcus and Diane stood in the backyard looking up at the stars. "I came to your door begging for milk," Marcus said quietly, "And you gave us everything." Diane leaned her head against his shoulder. "You came offering love that had nowhere to go. You came with a child who needed a mother. I came with a child who needed a father. We came with broken pieces that somehow fit together into something whole." Lily would grow up calling Diane Mama, never knowing in her earliest years that they didn't share DNA. Thomas would grow up with Marcus as the only father he'd remember, learning to change oil and fix engines alongside the man who'd stumbled into their lives seeking help and stayed to build a family. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, Diane would tell them the story of the rainy night when kindness opened a door and love walked through it, when a desperate father and a lonely mother found each other in the darkness and created light. Years later, when Lily was old enough to understand, Marcus would tell her about Rebecca, about the woman who gave her life and loved her fiercely for 21 days. And Diane would hold Lily close and say, "Your first mother gave you breath. I was honored to give you milk and love and everything else I had. You've had two mothers, sweetheart, and you've been blessed by both." Because that's what they'd built in that house on Maple Street, and not a conventional family, but a real one, not bound by biology or society's expectations, but by choice, by sacrifice, by showing up every single day even when it was hard. They'd built a family from desperation and kindness, from midnight knocks on strangers' doors and the fundamental human need to be seen, to be helped, to be loved. Marcus had come begging for milk for his child. Diane had fed the baby herself and, in doing so, had become the mother Lily needed and the partner Marcus had thought he'd lost forever. And in accepting that milk, in accepting that help, Marcus had given Diane something equally precious: the chance to be needed, to be essential, to transform her own pain into purpose. Sometimes salvation doesn't look like we expect it to. Sometimes it looks like a stranger's kindness at 2 in the morning. Sometimes it looks like a woman willing to give what she has to someone who has nothing. Sometimes it looks like two broken families becoming one whole one, not through perfection but through presence, through choosing each other again and again. In the end, that's what family is, and not just the people we're born to, but the people who choose to stay, who choose to feed us, to hold us, to love us through the darkness until we can find our way back to the light.